All right. So first off, I want to thank everybody for joining. This is going to be a nice happy hour right before the holidays, where we're going to be featuring um, a really amazing bar that I learned about probably a month or so ago, or a month or two ago, from the team at Goodnow Farms, and I'll get into that in a bit. And so for all those who may not know me, I'm Glenn. I'm the owner and founder of Chocotastery. We do virtual tastings, curated gifts, and we have our own chocolate cashew spread. If you haven't tried it yet, it's amazing. But yeah, that's not the reason of this event. I wanted to introduce all of you to Giff Laybe on with us from Nicaragua. He's a cacao farmer. He's the founder of Cacao Bisesto. And so he's worked with Tom and Monica at Goodnow Farms for a number of years. If you ever try their El Carmen Nicaragua bar, those are his beans that his company produces. And he's been on a journey for 10 years now with regards to some cacao that he found in Nicaragua. And it's an ancient Criollo variety. And if you are familiar with varieties of cacao, this is a very delicate, susceptible to disease type of variety, but is also very well sought after and has a nice delicate flavor and can wow anybody who tries it. So we have somebody else joining, so I will admit them. And so I just want to touch a little bit about the bar itself. If you'd ordered it through us or if you've tried it with Goodnow Farms, it's 70% dark chocolate. And so the beans are from the near the Yasica River in Nicaragua. And what I'm going to do is now, give it over to Giff to, share a little bit about himself and his journey. And then we have a bunch of pictures that we'll talk through afterwards, given from Goodnow, and especially some that Giff took today for us to see of the farm and of the trees that are there. And so, Giff, I will pass it over to you, and I will, I guess we could just leave it there, and then you could then, here we go. I'm going to pin you so everybody can see you.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you, Glenn, for this event today, allowing me to present. It's very exciting. I've been doing cacao farming and working with the American craft chocolate scene, you might say, for probably 13 years now, and this is something that I think has long been needed, is a little bit more engagement with consumers, explanation about what we're doing, right? I think that all too often within the craft chocolate scene, we have people like myself talking to other people like myself. We have a lot of chocolate makers that like to go to chocolate festivals and talk to each other and geek out about interesting things that we all kind of share in common and find to be interesting. But I think that this has been something that's been lacking in the past, is getting this message further out into the public and engaging with people who are interested and want to learn more about origins and cacao in particular. So thank you, Glenn. Talking a little bit about why I'm here, as probably all of you have noticed, like I am a Nicaraguan cocoa farmer, and yet almost certainly I'm not from Nicaragua, right? I'm actually from Madison, Wisconsin. But I started in Central America as a Peace Corps volunteer in the country of Honduras, the neighboring country here, 23 years ago now. It's amazing to say that, but I graduated college in 1999. And like so many people, probably didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with my life, but I joined the Peace Corps, and some of those decisions maybe were made for me, or maybe they became more clear. But I was sent to a very small part of, a small town in Western Honduras, somewhat near Guatemala, that everyone is a coffee farmer. And you're probably thinking, coffee? I thought we were here to talk about cacao, but everyone starts somewhere. So when I moved into the Peace Corps and everyone I came in touch with in this town was either a coffee farmer or had something to do with the coffee value chain. It just basically really impacted every aspect of life in this town. And I was really into it. You know, I was a young person. This was something that I was really excited about and really became interested in specialty coffee. And this was sort of at the same time that, you know, specialty coffee had been around for a while. I was talking to Glenn before you all got on the call and just talking about how when I grew up in the Midwest, I'm 46 years old, but I grew up, you know, as my childhood in the 1980s and my adolescence in the 1990s. And not to sound like a hillbilly or whatever, but you know, when I was a younger kid, I remember, you know, putting stuff on food. You were talking about ketchup and mustard, and something that was really exotic might be like soy sauce. And it wasn't because I grew up in a cave, but it was just sort of because, you know, the culture was different back in the 80s and 90s, and people didn't have access to all of these amazing flavors and origins of different foods, at least not in the Midwest. So starting in the 90s, you know, I started to notice, everyone started to notice more specialty food items, especially stuff like origin specific coffee was one of the first things that everyone sort of became familiar with in my family, in my household as well. My father always drank a lot of coffee when I was a kid, and I remember he would say that the chock full of nuts type of coffee in a can was better than the Hills Brothers or the Folgers. And so that was maybe a pretty modest beginning to all this, but it was a point of reference for me. And so when I moved to this place in Honduras where everyone was farming coffee, I immediately became very interested by it and learning about all the processes that go into making a specialty product. Um, Fast forward a little bit, the woman that I was very interested in the town, she and I got married. We are starting off having our first son, and I got a job here in Nicaragua, you know, the neighboring country to Honduras. And we moved here in 2007, and I took over an organic coffee farm and ecotourism venture that was really a great job for, you know, a first newlywed, you know, young family kind of thing. It was a very nice environment. Nicaragua is a much safer country than Honduras. Honduras, unfortunately, at the time that I was living there, was actually famous in the world for having the highest murder rate in the in the world. Not a good thing to be famous for. Um, so we really liked Nicaragua. We found Nicaragua to be very laid back and relaxed, and we just set about starting a, you know, our family. And I was working at this coffee farm, and at about that time, there were a lot of programs. Once again, it was all based around coffee. It was to improve the quality of coffee. A lot of NGO and development programs were offering alternative crops to coffee farmers to replace their low altitude coffee so that they would only be farming coffee at the highest altitudes and therefore producing the highest quality coffee. And at the lower altitudes, they were offering people crops like cacao and avocados and rambutan, which I don't know how to say that in English, but it's like it's an interesting fruit. It's an Asian fruit. Anyway, and cacao just seemed really interesting to me. Another analogy that I've made commonly in these sorts of forums is that when I was a little kid, my parents would take me skiing, and somewhere around the time I was 10 or 12 years old, all of a sudden snowboards showed up, and snowboards were like kind of like skiing, but just seemed cooler. And that's how I felt about cacao when I found out about it. Like, this is sort of like the coffee farming that I was really passionate about, but it just kind of seemed cooler. And I became really interested in all the minutia and sort of the idea that there was kind of a path to create, you know, I could go bushwhack my own path into this instead of coffee had kind of been done at this point. There were a lot of people that were already kind of doing origin specific coffees and stuff like this. And I thought that cacao really was an opportunity to get in this. And it was right at the same moment when the first sort of American craft chocolate makers of at least that generation of craft chocolate, like Patrick Chocolate and Rogue Chocolatier, were sort of showing up. And I thought, hey, it would be cool to start doing this at origin, you know, sourcing cocoa beans, and really got into it. I went to work back in Honduras, actually, for a Scandinavian company that was also sniffing around in this marketplace. Went back to Honduras for 2 years, but once again, it was just really too dangerous to live there. I had my pickup truck stolen by the local police and my life threatened over it, and craziness. But So my wife and I decided to move back to Central America and start my business in 2011. And we moved back here right at the beginning of 2012. And I, have a local business partner, a Nicaraguan guy, and we went out and collected our first wet cocoa mass to do the fermentation and drying in a centralized way on what I thought was March 1st of 2012. But then looking at the calendar, it was actually February 29th, 2012, because it was leap year. And so we named the company Cacao Bisiesto because bisiesto in Spanish is how you say leap year. So that's sort of where that came from. So we started this model of we are going to be collecting cocoa mass and doing centralized fermentation and drying, much in the same way of another initiative that was starting right at the exact same time and I was in touch with from the very beginning, and that was Maya Mountain Cacao of Belize, which has gone on to become Uncommon Cacao Group, which I'm sure most people are very familiar with. They're a little bit larger than I am. And it was really cool. It was really a fun moment, and everything was very sort of, exciting and new. And I really started reading a lot about the sort of genetics of cacao and trying to figure out a little bit more of the origin story. And of course, there's the genetic side, but there's also the marketing side of what we talk about cacao. And you keep seeing this word criollo, criollo, criollo coming up always. And there's always this linking of criollo with intrinsically high quality, right? Like that's sort of the origin story or myth. And really, I mean, just to go into the semantics of it, criollo in Spanish just means from here. And forastero, which they would consider to be bad, just means foreigner or stranger or from over there. And that's because it was coming from the Portuguese colony, the Brazil. And so, from the very beginning, you had this very sort of, I don't want to say xenophobic, but, criollo, ours, good, forastero, theirs, bad, bad. It was kind of the original sort of concept that goes all the way back to colonial times. And then on the island of Trinidad, which is off the coast of South America, the forastero and the criollo meet up and they form something called Trinitario, which just means from the island of Trinidad. But all of these terms have sort of been co-opted in the world of chocolate. And to this day, you'll still see large, sort of bigger industrial chocolate use the phrases criollo, forastero, and the blend being Trinitario. And I understand that there's, it's kind of a shorthand and it's a useful terminology for some chocolate companies. But I would like to point out that that's kind of like having a world vision of like, there are white people and there are black people and everybody else is a mix of white and black. And like, that is just completely not correct. And that's also very much not correct in the world of cacao. Like, people have gone on to do a lot of genetic analysis of cacao and have, first they talked about 9 different groups. I think now they talk about 14 groups. Some people talk about 17 groups, but there's all sorts of genetic groupings of cacao. And of course, that makes perfect sense. There's all kinds of people in the world. There's all kinds of, different species of things have a lot of diversity within them. And that is certainly true in cacao. And the other thing about cacao is that all of these genetic groupings, no matter if you believe it's 9 or 14 or 17, are fully able to intermingle. And it wouldn't be correct to call it hybridized because they're not separate species, but there is a mixing of all these genetics. And the vast majority of cacao that exists in the world today is of some sort of mixing. So why go into all this backstory? Well, I had the bright idea, or maybe the crazy idea, I don't know what to say, of trying to tease out some original criollo, to really find this stuff, because it is true that the natural area of criollo for existing is the northern coast of South America, along the coast of Venezuela, Colombia, and stretching up around the Caribbean into Central America. And, following the theory of this, I was thinking I would go out and try and find criollo trees. And, somehow I had the idea, a lot of people had the idea, that you're going to go out into some sort of deep, dark, remote forest and find these native species. Well, actually, when it comes to criollo is something that, criollo cacao that is, has always sort of been cultivated by people. And the more likely place to find a lot of these criollos is actually near settlements of human beings and really in people's backyards. Although the likelihood is that you're going to find somewhat mixed cacao. So finding something that's truly pure Criollo, it's difficult. So I have my company set up, and I'm collecting and fermenting cacao from producers. And in 2000, probably about August of 2012, I made the plunge of purchasing a property here in Nicaragua to develop as a farm with this project in mind. And I went to like liberal arts college and studied linguistics and economics. Like I don't really have a farming background, so that was another perhaps biting off a little bit more than I knew I would how to chew at the moment. But I started trying to develop this farm and did my first plantings of cacao, had found some Criollo stands of cacao here in Nicaragua, had them analyzed by the USDA. And sure enough, they came back as, in the type of statistical analysis they do, there's no such thing as 100%, but 99.9% Criollo, so we'll call it 100. And it was impossible for me to take the cuttings to do the grafting because the trees were so old and so poor, but they were in isolation. So I took the pods and I planted a nursery with the intention of planting the trees out. On February 15th, 2013, I had just a crazy car accident. I went off a side of a hill and the car just rolled down like in the movies, head over heels a bunch of ways. And I broke my neck and I fractured my skull, and my right arm to this day is still sort of paralyzed. But I'm not I don't really believe in religion or whatever, but if there is such a thing as miracles, I think it is a miracle that I'm alive and I'm not in a wheelchair and I don't have a brain injury or whatever. But the reason I mention all this is because it plays a critical part in the story of the farm. I had started these nurseries of cacao, which you plant like a seed in a nursery bag, like a little bag of dirt. And I was in the hospital for 6 months. I had to like learn how to walk again and stuff. So in the meantime, the people I had working on my farm, they didn't really know what to do with these cacao in the nursery. So they just went and planted stuff out in the field. And months and months later, and a whole rainy and dry season cycle later, I showed back up at the farm, and it took a long time to get back in shape to walk around and stuff. And finally, I was still really into the Criollo project. And so, not to drone on and on here, but basically, I planted out a bunch of Criollo that I was more excited about, you could say, at the time. And I had collected seeds from 4 or 5 different places. And I started grafting, like taking cuttings from these other Criollo trees and grafting more and more area and really working on it pretty hard from 2014, 15, 16. And these trees started to develop, and initially they developed quite nicely. Like the growth of the trees was not bad. But as soon as they started bearing flower cushions, a large percentage of these trees started dying. And it's because basically they are such a highly, highly susceptible, unique genetic type, but also so weak in the face of just normal fungal disease that a lot of these trees started to die. And I became a little bit sort of disillusioned with the whole idea. So I started to sort of pivot towards a much more conventional, still using good flavor cacao, not using the dreaded CCN 51 or anything like this, but other sort of Trinitario, there's that word again, types of cacao to populate the other part of my farm. But then one day I was walking in a part of my farm that had originally been planted with all these seed types. And I saw some like 2 or 3 trees that were just different than the other ones. And I asked some of the workers, I said, what are those over there? Like, I don't remember planting those. And they said, oh yeah, that one guy. And everyone in Nicaragua, there's a lot of nicknaming here. So everyone said, no, those were planted by El Berraco. And berraco in Spanish is sort of a pejorative term, meaning like, it depends on what country you're in, but like in Mexico, it means kind of piggish, but in other places it means kind of foolish. It's not a nice thing, but it was a guy that had been working for me at the time who wasn't particularly good. He no longer worked for me, but the other workers were like, the berraco planted those. And I said, really? Those are interesting. And I went over and looked at them, and I remembered that I had collected the seeds in a couple of different spots. And so I just deduced that these were seeds from a different, like one single pod, because each pod has 20 seeds in them or something. So anyway, I was like, interesting. So I had started to kind of give up on the Criollo notion, but here I had this other set of trees that were clearly Criollo, and they were performing just ever so marginally better than the other stuff. There were no, I mean, they still weren't approaching the Trinitarios types, but they at least were a little bit more satisfactory. They didn't seem to die with quite as much frequency. So that's a start. But then they started to bear a few fruits, and I started to do micro fermentation of the beans. And lo and behold, I mean, this is kind of where you have to admit to, I tried my hardest at this, but there's also an element of luck. It tasted completely unique. Like, this was what I was going for. I was like, finally, something's paying off here. Like, this is totally unique and very, very uniquely flavored. It still had a slower growth rate than a Trinitario. It still is nowhere near the yield of a Trinitario tree, but at the same time, I didn't set out to plant a farm to just be the highest yielding farm in the world. I wanted to do something kind of interesting and special. So it took a while. I sort of had to revisit this idea that I had sort of started to abandon a little bit about the Criollos, but then I started regrafting these trees. I mean, this is dating back like to 2016, 17 range. And it takes a while, you graft a tree and it takes a while for it to grow. But lo and behold, finally, they started to bear enough fruit, probably end of the pandemic year, I would say, that I started doing, experimental fermentation and drying and making some chocolate here with my wife in the house and tasting it. And it was really, really unique, right? So I'm very lucky that one of the chocolate makers that I work with in the United States is Goodnow Farms, and Tom and Monica Rogan. They're fantastic. They're, really, really good people, in addition to being fantastic chocolate makers, of course. But, that's one of the sort of luxuries. This isn't probably like the most lucrative line of work, but at least, it's something that's fun and interesting. And like, I get to choose the sort of people I want to work with. So Tom and Monica are the kind of people that, really fit the bill. They make awesome chocolate. They're very cool. So I sent them this bag of cacao and said, listen, you guys figure it out. Like, I didn't even really ask for a price at first. I just said, just check it out and see what you think about this. And they said, wow, this is very unique cacao. It has a totally unique profile. It wasn't the easiest cacao to work with, they said, honestly. Just the same is true in making the chocolate as is the farming of it, is that it requires a much more deft touch, you could say. I mean, they really had to fiddle around with the roast temperatures and the conching and all sorts of parts of the process that I would have to admit I don't know nearly as much as they know about it. I could tell you all about the farming and whatever, but in terms of the chocolate making, that would be something to ask them. But they really were excited about it. And they said, listen, we think that this cacao is really unique, I think is the safest word to use. I would hope people like it. I would hope people think it's very good, but I try to refrain from using good, bad kind of terminology and just saying like, these are very unique characteristics that the bar has. And they liked it enough. They said, we would like you to come to the Northwest Chocolate Festival with us and sort of do this presentation about the bar. And I was pretty excited to participate. So, I went. I was actually, it worked pretty serendipitously. I was coming back from Asia. I was doing some consultancy work in Papua New Guinea, and a short flight from Papua to LAX, and I could just go right up to Seattle. But so I went to Seattle, and it was really exciting to be in sort of the environment. I'd been to Northwest Chocolate Festival before in 2014, but hadn't been back in almost 10 years. And to see sort of how the community of craft chocolate has evolved and the expertise that sort of exists out there that honestly, no offense to anyone, but didn't really exist in the same way when I got into the craft chocolate movement and market, in the 2013, 14 range. And just got some really interesting feedback and talked to some really interesting, cool people about the bar. So I hope that hasn't been too ramblish of a background, but that's sort of a little bit the journey about how this bar came to be. It involves a lot of of trying, a few failures along the way, a little bit of luck, crazy car accident, and here we are. Like here it goes. But so go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, no, I want to thank you for sharing that story, and the journey. Shouldn't say a story; it's your journey that I definitely think we appreciate. And I'm talking for not just everybody here, but for those who you met and listened to you and Monica during that talk. Share the experience that in the all of the learning curves and the mysteries that you had to figure out yourself during that whole process. And I'm sure it was quite exciting and also quite stressful, and with that level of unknown, like what is this is something special, something unique that people may like. And I switched over the pictures on the slides to that one bag of beans that the Goodnow Farms team had gotten from you. And these are the beans themselves. And I think it was around that's like 50 kilos. So that's like 160 something pounds. And to have that amount, it's like Giff was sharing, it's quite stressful to make sure you bring out the best of those beans. And I had spoken to Tom earlier this week in preparations and getting some insights from him, and he shared that they did like four roasts on it. So they had to really dial in on doing hourly tests and tastes for the roasting, and also going and making the chocolate. They wanted to make sure that the full flavor profile, the true characteristics of the special nature of this bean came through. And you could see they shared a picture of the cut test. So cut test, for those who may not know, is when you get the beans, you take a sample of like 100 beans in the bag, and you could put it through this one machine and slice them, and you can see inside, and you can see normal. I should say not. I say normal, but it's like let's say Forastero or Trinitario or other varieties of cacao may have a when before they're roasted a very purple nature and color, and when they're roasted they're more brown. These here are more white, right? So that's also a key, like, okay, we have something special here. um they're not as like super brown. But I guess the he just threw that in there to show what they were dealing with. And then the next picture here is when they're starting to refine the chocolate. Um, and you can see how it looks almost like a light brown in color, and it's sort of like a milk chocolate. If I had to look at that initially and not know the variety or anything else, I would think that's like a milk chocolate type of color. And these are some factory photos. Monica here is looking in the checking in on the batch, and once they kind of finish the refining and the conching, they strain the chocolate. If there's any radicals, the inner piece of the cacao bean, that's really hard, so they take it out. And if there's anything else that gets in there by any chance, it's just kind of like a good measure that all chocolate makers do, is kind of strain their chocolate before they temper it. And so these are the pictures that Giff, you were talking about when you were in Northwest Chocolate Festival, the bars, and then this is your team, I want to guess, or the Goodnow Farms team
That
with
is
Giff.
the Goodnow Farms. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's Monica, and the two guys there are named, I can't remember their names. That's embarrassing, but they're really good guys. They're the guys that work in the factory, and they were, a couple of young guys that were out at the at Northwest and helping out, and Robbie and someone I can't remember.
It's
Embarrassing.
no, it's probably on my on the actual picture itself.
Yep. But
And yeah,
they're great guys.
Robbie,
We had a great time at Northwest. I
Griffin,
mean, it was really exciting.
Robbie and Griffin with
Griffin.
Monica. Yep, there you go.
Mhm.
Um, yep. And then so here next is these are some of the initial photos that he had with some of the pods. So I'm not sure
So
if you
just to jump in real quick, the one on the left is an immature pod. That's a pod probably, I would say, 4 to 5 months old. It still has a reddish outside to it.
Mhm.
On the right, as they grow closer to maturity, they lose the reddish outside. And obviously, once they're fully mature, they turn kind of, I mean, a ripe color, like yellowier,
Mhm.
is how you can tell cacao is. I mean, yeah, it changes color like most fruits, and so those are more mature. Those are on the left. It's a very small pod, so in a just to put it into context, it's probably only that big. Whereas
Wow.
there are certain other types of cacao, like more modern Trinitario types, that have been selected for productivity that can be, that big.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of seeds and pulp mass that come out of these pods compared to other one.
And we have some more than these are the ones that you took today. Just to, I guess give a little background of, the nature of these and, give or take how old these are compared to the first few pictures.
Right. So the one on the right is also probably going to be ready to be harvested, I would say maybe next week or the week after, but it's getting pretty close. And on the left, all of these smaller little, we call them chirelles, but this is the recently, like we're at the end of the rainy season right now in this part of Central America. The summer begins sort of in the new year. And this is when there's a lot of setting of fruits. And so for me, it's very exciting to walk around and see, like I have the end of the rainy season harvest is now, and then to see the setting of the fruits that will be the major harvest that happens in April, May, June,
Okay,
are those little fruits that are showing up there. So
cool.
it's something that I've had to learn. I've had to sort of learn to be a farmer now. And it seems like you're always, farming seems always better in the future. You're always sort of thinking, well, maybe it'll be good in 6 months, but it is pretty promising right now. Like things look pretty good for the upcoming harvest.
And these look like smaller baby ones too, right?
Yep, those are just the ones that have been recently set within the last couple of weeks. Yep.
And you can see, let's see here. You can see like the little flowers growing here,
Mhm.
which are pretty cool to
Yeah,
see.
there's a really good flower right to the left. And actually, go back one more, just back
Yeah.
one slide.
This one?
So right there, there's no, back forward one.
Nope, sorry. This one
Yeah, there's a flower right there, right? You just next,
right
that's a
here.
flower right there. Yep.
Yeah. And then so the midges come and pollinate it. And then
Mhm.
after a while it starts to start growing little mini pods out of the center. Um,
Mhm.
and then it becomes that.
Yep.
These are more so um these are all they look like they're all been pollinated and all going to
No,
be
those are flowers that have yet to open. So those
oh
little white things,
wow okay.
that's the flower that was, so
Mhm.
cacao is it produces it during the year there's more production time than off time. Basically, the only time of the year that there's zero production in cacao is August, September, beginning of October. And then there's this first little bump on the calendar, which is end of November, mid-December. There's a pretty nice little harvest. And then it kind of drops down again a little bit, but it continues to produce. And then in March, it goes up to the big peak, which is the most exciting time of the year. And then March, April, May, June, and then there's some kind of stragglers in July. But that's sort of the productive. So you're constantly, ideally in cacao, if you have really good conditions, if the rains are right, it should be sort of constantly in some kind of process. Even during the time of the year when there's not any harvesting, the trees still have a lot of fruit on them. So it it seems like that would be a good thing, but actually, I've come to learn that I liked working in coffee better, that you had a specific harvest period because it made it easier with the administration of labor. But oh well, I made my choices long ago, so I have to live with the way it is now. But
Oops,
so
oops. Sorry, I just went and canceled it. Okay. I think
no
these are
problem.
the last two. The last
Yeah.
two photos of so this is the expense, kind of looking at a couple of different trees. And
So
then
that was a picture that I wanted to show people. The way the tree looks, just it. Although for most people it wouldn't, you wouldn't notice it, but for me, the trees themselves of this specific type are very noticeable compared to other trees. The size of the leaves, the shape of the leaves is very different. Although I didn't do a very good job of capturing the neighbor there, but they're kind of a small tree, and the leaves are small and bushy, and it's kind of an erect tree. There are other trees that have kind of a droopier form, much larger leaves. Anyway, I could go on and on, but there's another pod there on the right. You can see sort of this exaggeratedly sort of warty, weird. I mean, that's any sort of intro to cacao book will tell you that Criollo has this sort of warped,
Mhm.
warty, weird looking pods, and this certainly is precisely that.
Yeah, and it almost looks like for somebody who's not familiar, something like, okay, is that a good pod or is that like a diseased pod? Because it looks like really ugly compared to like others that may look maybe minor bumps and not like gourd, one of those like
Yep.
pumpkins,
Right.
like a species of the pumpkin where it has those bumps, and I'm just like, oh, but like who wants that? But like here, it's like you have like a holy grail of cacao here. If you're like learn about it and understand what is that. But yeah, so I hope this was uh thank you for sharing all those pictures today, going through the farm and making sure we had some extra photos. I'm going to just move the slides back to, um, I'm going to not do that for now. I think we're just going to start tasting it. I just want to put up the slide with the bar again. So I'm just going to reshare that for a moment. And yeah. Um, so if you have it, I know Brittany, you have the bar. William, I'm not sure if you have a bar or not, but I think I'm just gonna pin myself so you can see. I think we just do, yeah. So if you see me, do you see both myself and the screen, Giff?
I do.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. All right, um, so this is the bar. Gonna open it up. So to premise this, I blindly, said I want to do this, and once I connected with Tom, learned more about it, and I told Tom this week, I'm like, I have not opened a bar yet to try it. I want to do this together with Giff and with whoever joins. So this is kind of like a raw tasting for me. So I'm excited about it. And so in the right form, the ingredients. So we have organic cocoa beans, organic cane sugar, and the cocoa butter. So I'm guessing they made some cocoa butter with this too, because they always add in some cocoa butter. Um, and so let's just see what how
Point
they
something out, Glenn, just
yeah
real quickly. So
yeah
they were very particular. They got the one sack of this particular selected kind of Criollo, but they are very, very faithful to doing what they say they set out to do. So they bought from me another bag of Criollo, of that other kind of Criollo that I was mentioning that didn't end up doing so well agronomically. but they bought a whole bag of Criollo at a very high price just to press it to get out the cocoa butter to
Okay.
only be adding a minimal amount. I mean, it's only, I think it's 2 or 3% that they add just to add for the viscosity to the bar.
That's
But
very,
the commitment to do that, I mean, that's like buying a brand new car to just like take the tires off it and put it on another car. Like it was a
yeah,
little bit like, wow, you guys really, you go the extra mile to make sure that it's completely legitimately what it
yeah.
is.
And
Yeah.
it's definitely true to their philosophy. All their bars are, really fantastic. And um, yeah. So this obviously is like a milk chocolate color. Um, so if you are on and you have the bar, feel free to kind of describe whatever you can go through however you want with regards to tasting it. You can follow along with me, or you can just go right in and just share whatever you want in the chat. Um, but for me, I'm just going to go through kind of the aromas, and then taste it. And Giff, feel free, chime in whenever. But all right, great. So yeah, so when it comes to the aromas, I mean, I do get like some chocolate notes, but I don't get it's not a wow factor of like a complexity of like chocolate and a Forastero chocolatey rich note. More subtle. You can tell that there's like other delicate flavor notes there. All right, so I'm gonna wait. Here's the big reveal. So so with a Criollo, you always have to like I always have to like stop and like pay attention to it because it's so delicate and there's so many things going on here.
It certainly doesn't have, the conventional chocolate flavor that all sort of not only Americans, but most people in the world have grown up expecting is sort of the West African amelo nalo flavor, which is,
Yeah,
what we consider the dark chocolatey flavor. And
yeah,
to me, in this bar, it's practically absent that fudgy,
hmm,
like
yeah,
quick or, the dark you kind of taste is kind of non-existent. I find it to be, yeah, I saw the comment there. I thought fruity. I think that that's
yeah.
very accurate. I can't really choose between strawberry or raspberry, but there definitely seems to be some kind
There's
of
a
red fruit note.
yeah, it's a like it comes through as like a little red fruit, and then midway through it kind of dissipates a little bit, but then I get like the nuts in there. They say they say strawberry cream and honey and cashews, but I do
Mhm.
get this like nutty roastiness in there. The whether it's cashews or other nuts, and so like the complexity journey is quite unique because whether that's it's what I believe would be a part of the flavors of those beans, but then it's a nice to have. Sometimes like you only get like major nuttiness on like a higher roast. But sometimes you can get it based on, if the actual beans impart that flavor based on the location. Um, William did put a question in the chat that I want to allude to, and so William, I'm not sure how familiar you are, but I do tastings and have a tasting guide. And so this is kind of just a little cheat sheet essentially for tasting chocolate. And what I normally do is I look at the first step, looking at the color, right? And then you break a piece and it's the snap, right? And the snap, this signifies how well tempered the chocolate is. So it has nothing to do with flavor or the quality of the actual beans, but it just highlights, how well was the chocolate handled or tempered, right? The
Yes,
process.
but I would also add that a well-tempered chocolate, in my opinion, also gives it's a vehicle for the flavor, or it's a delivery system for the flavor that's much like one of the things that I see here at Origin a lot, that there's a lot of NGO projects that try to train producers to make their own chocolate. It's a
Yeah,
well-intentioned idea, but one of the problems, people can usually learn how to roast and grind, but the tempering is actually much harder than,
very
I mean,
challenging.
everything about making chocolate is way harder than people realize, that people
Yeah.
should really have more respect for it in general.
Mhm.
But the poorly tempered chocolate has a really sort of dry, kind of gritty mouthfeel.
Mhm.
And I think by having that really well tempered chocolate, it just it maybe doesn't change the flavor, but it's a better vehicle for delivery of the flavor.
Mhm. Yeah, and even to continue on to that, sometimes when you have, it's also the experience of it, right? If it's not in temper, it may be like kind of soft, and it just melts very quickly in your fingers. So it's kind of a different experience. And like you say, it's a vehicle for the flavor. The actual structure. Um, so during tempering, you break down all the cocoa butter, which is the fat, the cocoa butter fat crystals, and you realign them based on a temperature range. And so when you build up that structure, it's like you're able to see, so a bar that has a good snap and a nice shine to it. Something that, like, if you want to spend the money that you're going to spend on a bar, you want like top notch, you want high quality. And when the structure is there and it's a loud snap or it's somewhat loud snap, that they paid attention to it and they're skillful in properly working with the chocolate that they make from those delicate beans. So that's the second step. And then obviously we smell for the aroma and then taste it. So I hope that helps with that. You're welcome. And also, as I'm going to probably taste this a couple of times, but there's a really creaminess that obviously you have the cocoa butter fat when you have like a 2 ingredient versus a 3 ingredient chocolate, that you'll get that more dryness of the bar without the extra fat. And so that cocoa butter fat kind of enhances it. And that's one thing I really like about Goodnow Farms, their philosophy on using the cocoa butter fat from the beans themselves to put back into their batch for those particular bars they're working with. So to see how they went the extra step for this particular bar, it doesn't even surprise me that they would do that. It's quite impressive that they've put together something that has the complexities and still has a nice mouthfeel. And I think um, the smooth, Brittany saying it's smooth. Um, so Brittany, you're sharing with your fiance and he's in love. I love that. And I do get a lot of good um, reviews of bars from the team there at Goodnow. We use them a lot for our tastings, and this is quite the special bar, and I'm happy to have supported the efforts, Giff. I know it was not cheap on our end, and I'm really glad that they paid the extra to the above and beyond to make sure to put together something really nice and special for us to experience for over all these years. It's not an easy thing, and I think we understand that. And for people who may not even understand the process at origin yet, or in there, they may not have been exposed to it at this point in life. To understand something like this is uh, really a fortunate thing, and I really appreciate all your dedication and efforts over the years, not just for the beans that you the Alcarmen beans that you work with for and sell to them, but also in all of your other activities. And I think you should definitely be really proud about this final product and how they showcased it and all of that. And we do have a question. Yes. Since the trees are still growing, will this bar continue to be available in the future? Um, so
Yes.
yeah,
Go ahead. Well, so the idea is just to talk about it sort of strategically. I agree. I mean, this is a very expensive bar, $35 a bar. It's not cheap, right? One of the things I've talked about with Tom and Monica over and over is once again going back to other sort of specialty food items, using all these analogies and examples from my earlier life. But I grew up in Wisconsin in the 1990s, right? So when I was in college, we had like Miller Lite beer. And if you really wanted to go crazy, you could maybe get some like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, someone maybe brought from California at some point. But there wasn't a whole lot else available. And a six-pack of beer was like $4 or something when I was in college for like the Miller Lite. But nowadays, even in Wisconsin, which we drink plenty of beer there, but now everyone's drinking really cool hazy IPAs and all this kind of stuff. And most people are not bent out of shape about spending $11 or $12 for a six pack of beer. Even, I mean, I realize there's also an effect of inflation, right? But well, you're 42 in Chicago, so then you have the anti-hero or whatever. That's good stuff. Good beer. Anyway, so I think that chocolate, I'm not expecting everyone to want to go and spend a ton of money every single time they want to have a chocolate. But I would like to believe that like other specialty food items, people will start to appreciate and start to compensate at a more reasonable rate the work that goes into making these bars. And obviously, if you want really cheap, check out grocery store chocolate. That's a cheaper thing. Just the same is true with coffees and beers and all sorts of other specialty items. But if you really want to have an enjoyable, unique experience, obviously paying a little bit more for a bar is acceptable to some people, and I hope that market continues to grow. In terms of this bar being available in the future, yes, this first sack of cacao was a labor of love and took a long time to produce. But I certainly hope that there's going to be more production. Talking about it strategically, like with my farm, I should probably end up producing this year something like 15 tons of cacao, the vast majority of them being the other sort of Trinitario, still a quality cacao, but not necessarily the most unique thing in the world. This kind of cacao, I would like to produce more of it, but I would never want it to become just whatever. And also, it wouldn't make any farming sense. I mean, I can't go roll out 30 hectares of the stuff. I mean, I'd need to win the lottery first or have some sort of other income source to make that be at all worthwhile. But I do want to continue to always be able to produce some amount of specialty stuff because that's why I got involved in this in the first place. And that's what makes it fun. And if I just produce, the Trinitario is cool. Like it's fun to see a tree full of fruits and it's fun to produce stuff and it's not bad cacao, but it's whatever, that isn't what makes things fun and exciting and sort of the passion project side of doing this. And so yeah, I'm probably talking more than I need to, but there will be more of this available. I hope to continue to market it first and foremost with Goodnow because they've been very good to me and they've been a awesome partner. But I have some other makers. There's some people in Toronto, Canada, who are working on a bar right now with it. And actually another guy in Vancouver. For some reason, there's more in Canada than the States. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
But I hope to be able to continue to produce very unique micro lots of Criollo and work with the sort of makers that make it worthwhile and exciting. So yeah, hopefully more to come in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Brittany, for the extra comment. Um, yeah, I'm still enjoying it. I'm sorry, but it's the subtle flavors that get me. It's like the caramelization. There's the caramely note in there, so it's not just like in your face, all of that. It's like a mellow journey. Um, so William brings up a good point. What bars have you tried recently that you'd recommend? Any makers that other than Goodnow that you like? Um, well, there's a number of them. I work with a I do tastings every year and deal with like dozens of different makers. Um, I mean, most depending where are you in. I'm just going to ask for locally first, and then nationally. But William, where are you based? Because maybe I could recommend some locally. Um, yeah, so depending East Coast, West Coast, there's North Carolina. So um I think like right off the bat, I think French broad chocolate is in the Carolinas. They have a wide variety of different origins. Giff, you're
Yes, and just to jump in, sorry, Glenn, French Broad Chocolate is also my largest client. I mean, Goodnow is one of the people I've worked with the longest, but French Broad actually buys the most cacao from me of any maker, and they're great. They're in Asheville. They have sort of a wider range of inclusions. They make a lot of bonbons and really really good chocolate, but also with the sea salt caramel kind of, which is
Mhm.
fine. I mean, I'm not in any way speaking down on that, but they have single origin specific bars. But French Broad also has um, they make uh, a 68% Nicaragua bar. That's also my cacao. Just to throw that out there. And most of the couverture chocolate, they make all their own couverture chocolate for bonbons and
Mhm.
inclusions. And or I shouldn't say but the cacao that I produce represents more than 50% of all their couverture stuff. So French
Nice.
Broad.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so East Coast. So I work a lot with, you know, Brittany, you mentioned letterpress and Castronovo. Castronovo's in Florida. They have a white chocolate with lemon salt in there. So it's like a salty and sweet, not too sweet, but it has that nice lemon flavor. If that's something that's like that was one of my first white chocolate bars that they've done really well with. Um, so they also do a lot of origins, number of origins that they do a really good job with and highlight those letterpress. They're in LA. If you haven't been to the West Coast, they're one to see. I work with White Label Chocolate. They started out in Santa Cruz. They moved towards a little bit further south to a new factory thing that they're opening up soon. They're working on it at least, and I have a number of their bars on my site. Um, yeah, they just put out. Uh, I just got their Philippines bar that I've used recently in a tasting. Um, uh, so what else did you say? So yeah, so when you talk, so I'm just kind of focusing on Brittany's comment of different makers that she kind of likes. Peru Ucayali region, letterpress does a specific bar with that got some fame for a bit, based on like a specific type of fermentation. So that's been a popular one. Um, I also work a lot with Mocha Origins in Pennsylvania, so the Northeast. They, I think they have a special focus on African origins. They were based. They started out based on a trip to Cameroon, and then they started like a farm there to help the Cameroonian locals learn about cacao and the process of building up a nursery. And I think around any year now they should be producing notable amounts of cacao in Cameroon that they could start making bars from that origin. I know this was many years ago. Maybe like, was it 2023? Maybe 3-4 years ago, I got a bar from them. That was Cameroon. It was like their first kind of their first trial, and it was fantastic. They work a lot with Uganda and Ghana co-ops out there, Tanzania as well. They have a number of different origins outside of the normal typical ones that you may see in a lineup. Let's see who else. Yes, peppermint bark. Peppermint bar is pretty good at mocha. They just started to put together relationships in Costa Rica and in Mexico. So they have a number of origin trips as well. So 2 years ago, it's going to be in January, I went to Uganda in the Bundibugyo region. So that was my first origin trip and it was with Mocha, and we got to see the coffee farms, the cacao farms, and vanilla as well. All right. Great, William. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. But yeah, let's see. Who else? So Giff, do you when you were in the States, do you outside of like your main clients, did you did you see any new makers or makers that you've never tried before? Because I know you haven't been to the Northwest Festival in quite some time.
Yeah, so what I noticed about the Northwest Festival is that, I mean, compared to 10 years ago when I was there last, or 9 years, whatever, a lot of chocolate makers have moved to Origin, or I mean, there's just a lot, chocolate makers more at Origin, which is exciting. I remember probably being maybe in 2000, I guess it must have been 2015 was the last time I went to Northwest before that. And the big news brand of that meeting was Mahu from Vietnam, was all over the place and winning awards. And it was really exciting. And they were, making really good chocolate at Origin in Vietnam. This time, there were a whole bunch of chocolate makers. There were people from Venezuela, people from Costa Rica.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound snarky, but like not all of them had the greatest chocolate, I have to say. Like I think that there's still some catch up to be done. I mean, that's true everywhere. I'm not trying to make that somehow a characteristic of only people at Origin, but um, that was one of the other things that I think was just really interesting about going to Northwest this year, was that when I went back in like 2014, 2015 range, and I admit it, like there was a lot of bad chocolate out there. I had people that were using my beans that, were turning it into things that they were like, yo, they're not so great.
Yeah.
But the overall level of just the community of chocolate makers and the sort of chocolate being made has gone up dozens of notches. And I mean, it's been 10 years or 9 years or something, but it was really impressive to see. And I think that that's been sort of a group effort, right? I think the chocolate makers are making better chocolate, but I think that those of us sourcing beans at Origin, fermenting and drying cocoa is really hard. Making chocolate is really hard. Sort of getting everything right at every step of the process to finally be turned into a good final product. It involves a lot of people, and a lot of things have to go right. And if one of the things goes wrong on the whole line, like the whole thing can kind of fall apart. So in general, I thought, there was, at the same time, there was kind of a step up in the overall quality of everything. There was still a few examples of things, like I said, maybe it's just a coincidence or not, but like people coming from Origin that had some steps still to be made. But that was kind of an interesting development, I thought. Something new that was happening. It seemed like there was a lot more interest in, there were people making stuff. There was people coming from places in Asia. There, I met a woman from Thailand. I met some people from places in the Middle East that were
Yeah.
into promoting origins, and that was new to me, so that was exciting.
Mm. Yeah. I think one of the I would say the pandemic makers that they started a this husband and wife couple. They started their chocolate business in the pandemic, or literally like the week before or something like that. Luminu. Um, I think they're in the Carolinas as well. So they're pastry chefs and their husband and wife, and they just kind of ran with it, and they're growing as they are, over the years. But I got some sample bars. I'm gonna actually show you guys. Um, the one then I've seen them at the last like two festivals, DC and in Dallas. And in Dallas, they were like, "Oh, well, we're making a chocolate bar with balsamic vinegar. That's still not yet on the market. They're still finishing it up." And then I think like a month or so ago, or so, I don't know, they sent me a bunch of bars. This micro batch bar. This is something that I think they may be selling it. I didn't order any from them yet, but this is the one, and I'm telling you, it's pretty good. We just got back from a trip to Italy, my fiance and I, and outside of um, the outside of the fact we got engaged there, we went to a balsamic factory in Modena, and so we were like, okay, well, when we came back, we actually tried this bar, and it's really fantastic. It has some of the unique flavor notes of the balsamic vinegar in there. So yeah, I'm just gonna taste it again. But Luminu, they're doing some unique flavors like um, uh, so panettone is a specialty bread, kind of around this time of the year. It's kind of a holiday bread. Um, uh, then they have peppermint tea and fennel and cranberry. These are all like unique flavors that are for the holidays, I guess. Um, and I haven't really picked any up yet, but they're something unique that uh, I've seen in the past like 1 to 2 years, that they've been growing and in popularity as well. Um,
Cool. I mean, there's so much happening. I mean, it's always very exciting. It's a small community of makers. I've seen a lot of, this on the one hand, it's grown for sure, but I still, go to a festival and see a lot of the people that I've known for a while, and it's exciting to see sort of new ideas coming to the table and
mhm,
all that. But I appreciate you, Glenn, and this space and this forum, and I hope that people really take interest in these kind of events. So I'd just like to thank
mhm,
you for this invitation and for the support with the chocolate bars, and
mhm.
wish you the best of luck with your venture.
Thank you. The same on this side here. Over to you in Nicaragua. Appreciate your time and for all that you've done and continue to do to help support our industry. Um, yeah, and Brittany, thank you for joining as well. You and your fiance, enjoying all the chocolate. So always good to see you at our events. And yeah, so also have a happy holiday season. It's literally 10 days away. I don't know if you're prepared yet or not, but we are not here. We're going to be soon. Um, but yeah, thank you so much. And what I'll do is, have this video available. Giff, I'll send you the link to it as well. Just private. And I know a couple people wanted to see it. So I'll just, cut it down a bit and then be able to have that for anybody who wants to view it and to hear the story. Um, yeah. So thank you so much. And
Okay.
Yeah. See you soon.
Thanks a lot. Have a good evening, everyone. And yep, happy holiday season. And thanks a
Bye.
lot. It's good to meet you all. Bye.
Bye.